Namaste, my dear ladies. You're tuning into Your Menopause Your Way. This is the menopause education that all women deserve, and I'm determined to give it to them. And because it's a real education, you really do have to start with video 1 and watch them all in order if you really want the education. There's much more to menopause than you can possibly imagine. And if you start with video 1 and watch them all in order, you will find yourself saying, "Holy cow, how did I get this far in life without knowing any of this?" And the answer will be, because there has never before in the history of humankind been an education on menopause available to women that is easily accessible and easily understandable. So please take advantage of the fact that I am on a mission to give you what you deserve. And also be aware of the fact that I do not have an angle or a product to push on you. I don't care what you choose to do to manage your menopause, but I do care that you know what you're doing. And without a real education, I can guarantee you that you will not know what you're doing. So I present these videos in precisely the right order to ensure your understanding. All you have to do is watch them in order. So this is video number 286, and it is part of a unit on the 3 big diseases of estrogen deficiency: heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's. I already presented huge individual units on each of them. And this unit consists of 3 parts. We just finished the first of the 3. It was all about the similarities and differences between the 3 big diseases. And now we're going to move and start on the second part. This video will address the most basic aspect of the 3 diseases. In other words, why is estrogen at the root of these 3 diseases? Why are they associated with estrogen deficiency at post-menopause? This is a very critical video. It really pulls together so many things that form the foundation for why it's so important to address these 3 big diseases in any education on menopause. You know, my book addresses these 3 things individually. It does not give you this big picture perspective of all 3 diseases together. In various previous videos, I have taught you that estrogen had many different functions in your body. It was not merely a reproductive hormone that existed for purposes of having menstrual cycles and getting pregnant. You've learned that there is a long list of symptoms of estrogen deficiency, and they encompass many different parts of your body. That alone is evidence that estrogen has to do with more than just reproduction. Many of the symptoms of estrogen deficiency are symptoms of aging. Well, that's because estrogen was your fountain of youth. And if your fountain of youth disappears, you start aging on the inside as well as on the outside. Fatigue, forgetfulness, joint pain, hardening of your arteries are all consequences of aging that are due to loss of your fountain of youth. You've also discovered that estrogen was your body's lubricant. It's like a great big can of oil for your body. Well, if the can of oil disappears, all sorts of things get dry on the inside as well as on the outside. Dry skin, dry eyes, dry mouth, dry vagina, hardening of your arteries. They're all consequences of losing the lubrication that estrogen provided. Another thing you've learned is that your estrogen played a role in maintenance of many of your body's functions and in maintenance of your anatomy. Your temperature, sleep, moods, hair volume, weight, urinary continence, absence of urinary tract infections, sex drive, bone density, and brain density are all dependent on estrogen. So when you lose your estrogen at postmenopause, you experience hot flashes and night sweats, insomnia, mood swings, irritability, and depression, hair loss, weight gain, urinary incontinence, urinary tract infections, loss of your sex drive, loss of bone density, and loss of brain density. That accounts for 16 of the items in the long list of symptoms and all 3 of the big diseases. So there's a whole lot more to estrogen than just its role as a reproductive hormone. Back in video number 77, I presented menopause as an estrogen deficiency state. You learned that a deficiency state is any situation in which your body lacks something that it needs to function properly. In that video, I compared the estrogen deficiency of postmenopause to the insulin deficiency of diabetes and the thyroid hormone deficiency of hypothyroidism. And you saw that all hormone deficiencies cause a long list of symptoms in the short term that are supposed to alert you to the fact that something's missing. The collective word for all the symptoms associated with the disease is morbidity. Here are the symptoms, or morbidity, of insulin deficiency if you have diabetes. Dry skin, dry mouth, weight loss, skipped periods, drowsiness, yeast infections, frequent urination, extreme hunger, extreme thirst, abdominal pain, nausea and vomiting, blurred vision, muscle weakness. And here are the symptoms or morbidity of thyroid hormone deficiency if you have hypothyroidism. Fatigue, forgetfulness, depression, joint stiffness, dry skin, hair loss, weight gain, cold intolerance, heavy periods, slow heart rate, constipation, hoarseness, muscle weakness. Now, if we make a chart showing all these symptoms of insulin deficiency and thyroid hormone deficiency and compare them to the symptoms of estrogen deficiency, it looks like this. Across the top row, you see the 3 different hormone deficiencies: insulin deficiency, thyroid hormone deficiency, and estrogen deficiency. In the far left column, you see 3 categories: those that are identical to estrogen deficiency, those that are similar in some way to estrogen deficiency, and those that are unique to a particular hormone deficiency. The background colors have no significance. I just used them to demarcate one line from the next and made the chart appear somewhat like a rainbow. I've put all the symptoms that are identical to estrogen deficiency in red text. Those constitute 10 of the symptoms of menopause. I've put all of the symptoms that are similar in some way to estrogen deficiency in purple text. Those constitute 7 of the symptoms of menopause. And I've put all the symptoms that are unique to a particular hormone deficiency in black text. Those constitute 11 in all, with only 2 of them being unique to the estrogen deficiency of menopause. The point of this chart is to demonstrate the general nature of all hormone deficiencies. They all give you a bunch of symptoms that involve many different parts of your body. Why? Because hormones, by definition, are substances that travel all over your body to perform functions in multiple parts of your body. And wherever they perform a function, you have receptor sites for that hormone. If the receptor site is left empty, your body doesn't function properly. And if you ignore the deficiency long enough, these symptoms evolve into much larger problems, which become diseases that can be fatal. The collective word for death due to a disease is mortality. So if you ignore insulin deficiency, eventually you have all of the following contributors to mortality. Sores that don't heal, causing limb amputations, blindness, kidney failure, and death. And if you ignore thyroid hormone deficiency, eventually you have mental illness, a heart attack, a coma, and death as causes of mortality. And with estrogen deficiency, you have what this video and this unit are all about. The 3 big diseases: heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's as causes of mortality. So, for purposes of your menopause education, we care about estrogen deficiency. And the key is to understand why estrogen is at the root of these 3 diseases. In the case of estrogen deficiency causing a heart attack, there are 2 reasons that estrogen is at the root of the problem. The first is that estrogen was the fountain of youth that prevented buildup of fatty plaques in your heart arteries. Second, estrogen was the fountain of youth that kept the walls of your heart arteries nice and supple by acting as a lubricant. Loss of your estrogen at post-menopause causes 2 things to happen. You start building up fatty plaques inside the walls of your heart arteries. And the wall becomes very hard and brittle, resulting in hardening of your arteries. In the case of osteoporosis, estrogen was the fountain of youth that deposited bone in mass quantities at the time of puberty, and it maintained that large quantity of bone throughout your reproductive life. And when your estrogen disappears at postmenopause, so does your bone. The result is a low quantity of bone that fractures easily. And in the case of Alzheimer's, your brain was fed by estrogen that occupied distinct numbers of estrogen receptors. It made your brain dense and your thinking crisp and clear. And when your estrogen disappears at postmenopause, and those estrogen receptors are empty, your brain is then deprived of its fuel. And without its fuel, it begins to shrink. And the inability to think makes it so that you cannot give your brain the mental challenges it needs to survive. And that makes it shrink even more. So these 3 diseases are the most important aspects of postmenopause, which constitutes the entire second half of your life. And that's why I'm going to approach them every which way to ensure your complete understanding. So the summary for today is this: estrogen deficiency at postmenopause causes the 3 big diseases because it performed vital functions in your heart, bones, and brain that cannot occur without it. And when you lose your estrogen at postmenopause, you face the morbidity and mortality of estrogen deficiency. You know, in medicine, we have a weekly conference called Morbidity and Mortality, or M&M. It's an event that takes place early in the morning, and all the practitioners, professors, and students in a certain field of medicine attend. In my case, it was the entire obstetrics and gynecology service. And the purpose of M&M is to present every patient that had a bad outcome. And there are specific parameters that designate what constitutes a bad outcome. For obstetrics, any baby with a low score at birth has to be presented. And any woman who has any untoward event during or after pregnancy has to be presented. For gynecology, any woman who has a complication of any kind has to be presented. For surgical patients, any woman who has a complication before, during, or after surgery has to be presented. And of course, all deaths have to be presented. Well, when I was a resident, there were always donuts served at this conference. So we called it Death and Donuts. And we hated it when we had to present all our bad outcomes for which we were not proud. You know, medicine is a very competitive profession. And when we presented a case at M&M, we would stand at the front of a room, big auditorium, behind a podium, and speak into a microphone facing a huge auditorium of all our colleagues while we presented the whole story of whatever disaster had occurred. And the entire auditorium of onlookers judged how we had managed the patient. Then they would ask all sorts of questions, point out all our errors, and degrade us in every possible way. Of course, despite my use of the word we and us, plural, if you were presenting a patient, you were the only person at the podium. This was never a group responsibility, so it was humiliating. And medicine is not only competitive, it's also brutal. There's no coddling. Nobody cares about your feelings. M&M was the kind of thing that made the presenter wish he or she could just die right there on the spot. So here we have a situation in which we know how to recognize hormone deficiencies, and we know how to treat hormone deficiencies. So it's inexcusable to let someone develop the morbidity and mortality associated with a hormone deficiency. And yet, any patient who did not take hormone replacement therapy for menopause and ended up with the morbidity and mortality I've described today would not be considered appropriate for an M&M conference. Then and now, if your doctor did not give you HRT and you ended up with heart attack, osteoporosis, or Alzheimer's, no one would present you at M&M to reprimand the doctor who failed to give it to you. But oddly enough, failure to replace insulin and thyroid hormone would still be considered huge faux pas in the practice of medicine. Any doctor who failed to give you either of those hormone replacements would be in big trouble for sure. The odd thing about this is the differences in the numbers of women who would be affected by such oversights. Very few women have insulin or thyroid hormone deficiency, but all women end up having estrogen deficiency. So why do we fight all other hormone deficiencies that will only affect a few women, but throw in the towel on the one that will definitely affect all women? I want you to ponder that a bit. And this is where I'll stop today. But be sure to come back next week when I'll discuss how the estrogen window is really about aging as it pertains to these three big diseases. If you haven't been watching all my videos in order or have not watched the unit on the estrogen window of opportunity, I strongly urge you to watch videos 80 through 90 before next week's video. They will give you the foundation you need for the upcoming videos. And I applaud you for getting this education. I hope you know that I'm on a mission to provide it to all women. So please don't sabotage yourself by jumping around all out of order. And if you just want to cut to the chase, as they say, schedule a consultation with me at menopausetailor.me. A consultation is the absolute most efficient way to get the whole education and have it all tailored specifically to you. For a consultation, I create a great big document that gives you the big picture, and I send it to you 72 hours before the consultation. You need to read the entire document before we have the consultation, because it gives you the platform from which you can have the conversation. And most of them are on the order of over 50 pages. So you need to make time to read it all. Your consultation will be much more productive if you've read it. Other than that, You can stalk me on FaceTime, Twitter, and Instagram, and you can subscribe here on YouTube. And I will see you next time. Bye.